Thank you so much, Anu. I'm so excited and honored to be on this platform. And whilst I'm doing a little intro, you might need to just either make me co-host or allow me to share my screen just now, so that we can jump into the presentation just now. But as Anu says, I mean, my strong passion, we Be Agile is a for-profit consulting company, but we spend around about 30% of our time growing communities, not only global communities and African communities and South African communities, but also helping individuals who are aspiring to be agilists to really just mentor and guide them. So a couple more things, Anu, that has come on since the last time we chatted, is that I'm also now on the committee where there's a huge event that's going to happen in 2021 in February, which is the Agile 20 Reflect. Now, the Agile Manifesto was actually written almost 20 years ago. So February it'll be 20 years, and we're putting together a global 1 month festival, which anybody can participate in. Anybody who wants to have an event there can have an event. Just think about it. You know the street festivals they have in Calabar, which is a month long, and people just come and do what they want. Well, that's the type of festival we're looking for. So that's very exciting. Working with a great bunch of people and getting that together. And then the last thing which we're really excited about is that because of our work in communities, we've actually been nominated for the World Agility Forum Awards, which is next week, and particularly in the area of growing communities. So, we'll let you all know how that goes, but we're very honoured to have been nominated for that. So, I just wanted to say again, thank you for the time. I just wanted to double check. We've basically got an hour together. Hey?
Yes, we do.
Good. So I want to just go through some stuff and then leave time for questions, observations, etc. So whilst I have a slide pack, I may not go through all of the slides, but I will send them to Anu, who can then send them on to you. So let me start sharing my screen. Okay. I'm just getting it to do it. Is that showing, or must I swap the presenter view?
Yeah, we can see it, but you might want to swap. Yeah.
Yeah. Is that better?
That's better.
Okay, good stuff. All right, so as Anna said, the title of this is Normalizer 2019, Celebrating the New Abnormal, the Agile Way. And the reason for the title of that is I keep on hearing, the new normal, the new normal. I don't believe there's much that's normal about what is happening at the moment. So it's very abnormal. It's very abnormal in good ways and in bad ways. But when you travel around and you see what's happening, and you go into restaurants and you see the restaurants struggling, you see how people are struggling to connect sometimes because they've sat at home for I don't know how many months. We were locked down for a few weeks, and whilst that is tough, I can't believe how tough it would have been for somebody who was maybe single, who was at home by themselves, or even worse, a woman who was at home with an abusive husband. So there was I don't believe that we're going into a new normal. I think we're going into a very new abnormal. And I think the reason behind today's session was just to say to the audience that embrace the new abnormal. It brings opportunities. We are seeing some companies that are literally thriving. I mean, we're all on Zoom today. Zoom's share price has gone up by, what's it, 3,000 or 4,000% this year. online ordering of various aspects is going on. And one of the things that we, particularly from an African perspective, is there's just so much room for growth. I mean, we've got this young, budding population of over 1 billion people. Technology is becoming more and more accessible. Bandwidth is becoming more and more accessible. And we're seeing such amazing sort of discoveries happening, or new ways of banking. I'll show you a slide later on to show you which industries are starting to do a lot worse because of the economic crisis we're in. And one of them is the banking industry, the insurance industry. And it's countries like Nigeria and Egypt and Rwanda, not Egypt, sorry, even though Egypt is on there, but more Kenya, Rwanda, where we're starting to see all of these new fintechs coming in, new ways of exchanging money, new ways of paying each other, and that's been driven a lot by necessity. And so when I look at COVID-19, for example, so our lockdown was announced in early March. I literally lost all our business. We lost every single bit of business that we had coming up for the next 3 months. We had in-person workshops. We had a lot of consulting, which we would be doing on site. And literally overnight, we had clients just canceling all of that stuff. So I could have sat back and said, okay, well, let's just wait for everything to come back to normal. But we changed the way we did things, and it's created so much more opportunity for us. So, for example, when we now do our online workshops, we've got people joining us from Australia, from France, from the UK, from America, from Brazil, from Singapore. So it's opened up a huge market for us. And we always thought, well, it's much better to do an in-person workshop than it is to do an online workshop because of the person-to-person experience. The odd thing is that with our particular workshops that we do, we're finding we're getting better ratings for our online workshops than we did for our in-person workshops. There could be various reasons for that, and we think that one of those reasons is that people that are generally more shy in-person workshops are now given the opportunity to really participate and to be part of the workshop. So I'm going to run this theme throughout this presentation, is to say the world has changed. It's not going back to the normal way it used to be. So understand that. Understand the change that is happening, and we'll talk a little bit about that. And look for your place in that world. Be you a company or be you an individual. There's place for people that understand the change that's coming, and you just need to understand what those changes are and how you can take advantage of that. So sometimes, for those of you who don't know what a black swan is, a black swan is an event that happens that we could not have predicted. It's a big event, it is hugely disruptive, and we could not have predicted it. And many people have referred to COVID-19 as a black swan. It actually wasn't. Steve Jobs not Steve Jobs, Bill Gates in 2015 actually predicted in a video, which had 30 million views on the 3rd of April 2015, he predicted that within the next 5 years, we would have a global pandemic that would bring the economy to its knees. And it would cause lots of disruption, it would cause lots of deaths. And he was pushing governments and business to start thinking about that and to start planning for that. And as we know, most of them didn't. So COVID-19 was not really a black swan after all. It was something that had been predicted, and it was something that countries and organizations should have had some sort of plan for in case it could happen. And we'll talk about that later on when we talk particularly about the impact model that we put together. If I have a look at this slide here, it's really starting to talk about how quick did the economy, first of all, what impact did black swan events have on our economies globally, and how quickly did those economies rebound? Now we're using the S&P 500 performance as a barometer here, which is not always, stock markets, they obviously do have a huge impact, but they're not always the total barometer. But let's use that as a barometer. And you'll see that, for example, on COVID-19, the stock market, and this was sort of March, April, lost 29%. But if you look at the global financial crisis in 2007, it lost 56.8%. And it took 1,022 days to recover. We don't know how long it's going to take to recover from COVID-19. You've got people talking about, U-shaped recoveries, W-shaped recoveries, V-shaped recoveries. But if you have a look at this particular slide, now this slide here, if you watch it carefully, it's going to change color. So let's go back to when it's all red. So when it's red is this year, 2020. And where all the red and the different flavors of red are is the shrinkage in national economies that happened in 2020, specifically around what COVID-19 has brought us. So you'll see just red all over the place, very little green. But if you start heading into 2021, you suddenly start seeing a lot more green and a lot more growth in economies. Places like Australia, minus 6.7% this year, but going up to 6.1% growth next year. So what this really tells you is, and this is predicted, from the IMF, its predictions, and what it's essentially saying is that the economy is going to bounce back next year. But it doesn't mean that the economy, the way that you know it, is going to bounce back. So if energy was a really strong player in the American economy for the last 15 years, it doesn't mean that when America grows by 4.7% next year, that it'll be the energy sector that grows it. It just means that the overall economy will grow by that, and that we need to make sure as organizations and as individuals that we understand where those positive changes are going to happen and how can we take advantage of this. You must probably at this stage sitting there and saying, okay, so what has this all got to do with Agile? I'm going to get to that just now. Okay, so just bear with me. And what were the top performing sectors up until around about June this year? And we're starting to see there, you can see there at the bottom left, energy down 29.5%. Financial, so this is really worrying because your banking industry is going to shrink. This includes your insurance companies, is going to shrink. And the question is, well, does that not cause huge instability in the world when that happens? And to some extent it does. But what you're finding is that the fintechs are starting to really hit at the big banking companies. So we do work for quite a few banking companies in South Africa. And the question starting to arise is, are we a banking company that has a very strong technology backbone? Or should we start becoming a technology company that sells financial services products? More important, if we go up to the blue, the information technology arena are really starting to grow at 13.5%, which is not, is not surprising. Your consumer discretionary, so you're starting to see people spending more money on discretionary issue items, such as travel, etc. That'll start growing. Communication services and healthcare, just a small growth there. This is a different one. This is from McKinsey, which if you look at this, it says, okay, so the top ones where the blue line spreads to the right is showing in billions of dollars the net gain of that industry in terms of the 2020 market valuation. And you're looking at companies that are doing semiconductors, literally going into 3 trillion positive, your pharmaceuticals, personal products, software, technology. The black spots are where they were in 2018. So if you look at the black spots in there, in the blue bar graph, that's where they were in 2018. And then the end of the bar graph is where they should be in 2020. But this is already starting to give you a picture of the industries that are going to really, really do well. And then those that are looking at the bottom, the transportation, capital goods, insurance, banks, diversified financial, utilities, energy are going into the negative. That doesn't mean there isn't money to be made there, but there's a lot more money to be made in those top six industries there, and most of them are going to be looking at increasing, their flow of capital by 275 plus $1 billion in 2020. So we're almost getting to the end of the economic part of this presentation. If you have a look at this particular slide that comes from BCG, Boston Consulting Group, one of the things that I really like doing about this is that you're starting to see in 2023, and if you have a look at the green lines, is where the flow of trade is going to start moving towards in a positive manner. So if I have a look at China into Africa, you're looking at an 11% increase flow of trade. If you're looking at India into Europe, it's going up, going up by 22%. You're looking at places like going into the USA. There's a lot less trade going in there. Again, just a slide, and when I send you this, just have a look at these slides, dig a bit deeper into it, and you'll start seeing that and we're in an African platform today, that there's a lot of money that's going to be coming, flowing trade into Africa between now and 2023. So again, COVID-19 has created tremendous hardship. I was talking to a guy today, who said, "I'm so happy to still have my job, but my salary was cut by 40% to allow me to keep my job." So the hardships have been there, and we see it on the streets. To exacerbate the problems in Africa, is we already have a lot of poverty. So COVID-19 has just exacerbated that, but I think there's real opportunity to bounce back, and the agile community can play a huge role in that. So here we go. The emerging recipe for success is business agility. If you have a look at this particular slide, it shows you the covers of various top magazines, and these are all covers of other top magazines or headlines in their particular online offerings. So Harvard Business Review, Agile at Scale, Creating a Culture of Experimentation, Agile Executive. I'm not going to read all of them, but if you have a look at them, the big organizations, the common thread that is coming through there is agile, 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 agile. And then we come to the debate, well, why are we talking about business agility versus agile? And it's simply because most of the time organizations have very much stuck with agile being something that is driven by the tech side of the business, and not across the value chain. And business agility really, one of the things we talk about in business agility is that you can only be as agile as your least agile department. So if your HR department, so the agile meetup that I was on from Johannesburg, that was just before this one, we had a speaker from the USA called Jadina London, and she was speaking about structural agility. And it was very much about how you do organizational design from an agile perspective. Now, one of the problems you face in that arena is that if your HR team is not on board, the first thing they're going to say, well, you can't really design your teams in an agile manner because it doesn't fit into the way we do grading. It doesn't fit into our ERP system, et cetera, et cetera. So we can't just look at agile from a tech perspective. We've got to look at it across the value chain. Finance has to change the way they budget. Procurement has to change the way that they, onboard service providers. We've got to start looking at ecosystems, a much more an ecosystem way of looking at the world than just looking at it from an insular perspective. And for those of you if you want to understand what I mean by ecosystems, is that we have suppliers, then we have our own company, and then we have customers. If we look at that whole chain as an ecosystem of partnerships, we start gaining a lot more out of that than looking at them as suppliers and customers and us. We look at it all as a whole ecosystem. So why is this suddenly becoming so important? So Rita McGrath, who's become one of the top strategists globally, she basically says we are working with outdated tools and assumptions. And then if you have a look on the right-hand side, that's too, it's sort of like a juiced up version of what we call Martek's law. And Martek's law basically says that the speed of change has been exponential from a technology perspective. And we all know that. I mean, we've got, there's technology out there. I think you already must probably read about Elon Musk, who, by the way, is a South African, or an African, so we should all be proud of him. So Elon Musk has already started, playing with embedding things into brains and all of that. So, the speed of changes in terms of technology is exponential. But think about it, the way that we manage businesses is very logarithmic. We haven't changed the way that we manage a business in the last 20, 30 years. So when you sometimes speak to organizations that are going through an agile transformation, and you go speak to the chief executive officer, he or she will say, "Well, I don't really know about that. It's not for me. That's the technology people. I don't get involved in that." It has to be driven from the top down, and your capability gap between the way technology has changed and the way that we manage businesses is what caused a lot of the problems in COVID-19. Is that companies were just not ready for it. So what is business agility? So here's a definition that comes from the Business Agility Institute. It says the ability to anticipate, so understand what could happen and adapt to change, learn and pivot, deliver at speed, and thrive in a competitive market. Because gone are the days when big eats small, today fast eats slow. The ability to disrupt, learn, and deliver faster than competitors may be the only sustainable competitive advantage. And we're seeing significant results. I mean, this actually comes out of the SAFE website, Scale Agile website, where they're saying, their clients that are just using Agile, never mind the business agility side of stuff, are seeing a 50% faster time to market, 50% defect reduction, etc., etc. So there are case studies out there that just show what benefits we achieve from doing Agile, even if it's not across the whole business. These particular business results have been enjoyed by companies where Agile is really still very much sitting in the technology space. And then we've got there, what are the problems we're solving for? And I'm not going to read through all of them, but one of the things that I really, we in the last 2 weeks, we had a big disruption in South Africa. An American shampoo company, Tresemme, had products on the shelves in South Africa and literally insinuated that the shampoo was for people that were black because their hair was damaged, and not for people that were white because their hair was fine. Now, of course, we live in a society where that is just unacceptable. But the question for me was, how did that advert ever get in front of everybody? Because if you're looking at this from a customer perspective, customer empathy mapping, customer journey mapping, that type of thing, never mind you shouldn't have thought about it in the first place. You just shouldn't have let it get past there, because if you'd done an empathy map, you would have understood that this was just not on. And then also the no discovery process, etc., etc. And then there's some case studies of companies that are using Agile across the world. So if business agility is the recipe, then what are the ingredients? So we're looking at a much more nuanced, deeper understanding of your customer. We've got to look at everything from the customer perspective. We're starting to see more and more in organizations that you get the customer experience manager, and that's starting to come, or director, or president, or vice president. We're starting to see more of that. Accelerated experiment-driven innovation. So again, in terms of the discovery part of Agile, we often see in organizations that Agile and design thinking are separated from each other. Well, they shouldn't be, because literally the innovation and the design thinking and the product development, that should be done in conjunction with the Agile teams that actually have to deliver them, so that it can be a seamless process and they understood what the original intent of the product was. Improved prioritization, simplified delivery, and tech-enabled efficiency. So how do we prioritize? It's not, again, about who shouts the loudest, and we often see that, but how do we go about prioritizing what goes into the backlogs? Evolved approaches to leadership and culture, core technology, and agile ways of working. So to me, there's two big codes that haven't yet been cracked in the agile world. One of them I'm going to be hopefully writing a white paper on towards the end of the year. But let's talk about, first of all, the leadership issue. We ask for our leaders to be servant leaders in agile. But we've taught them over all the years to be command and control leaders. We incentivize them to be command and control leaders. And we don't even know where they are on the continuum between command and control and servant leadership. So one of the things that I talk about often is saying we need to create psychological safety for leaders to be able to transition from being servant leaders to become, from being command and control leaders to being servant leaders. So that's the one thing that we need to crack. The other one has to do with performance and reward. I won't get into that too much, but how do we reward and performance manage teams over individuals? So that's another one for another day we can leave. And then real-time insights, understand what's working, what's not, and where a pivot may be needed. Then the target outcomes, equally clear and include increased customer satisfaction and loyalty. So I'm sure you're all aware of OKRs. So this is what we should start driving. Accelerated innovative solutions, increased revenue, margins, market share, and profitability, increased strategic alignment and adaptability. And that's where business agility really plays a big role, because how do we align the full value chain here? Simplified delivery structures and practices, improved collaboration and agile ways of working, improved adaptive core tech capabilities, and increased employee engagement and empowerment. So we work a lot with what's called the Enterprise Business Agility Model. It's one of the workshops that we deliver, and it was developed by a company called Agility Health in the USA. And they really look at it from 7 pillars. I just want to get through this, and then I'm going to show you sort of one more slide, and then we can open up for questions. So the first one is customer seat at the table. And we've spoken about that a lot, and saying, how do we develop that deep understanding and engagement? I mean, I'm on the board of the Business Agility Institute, and we were sitting the other day and we were doing customer personas. And I was quite shocked that when somebody came up with a draft for how to do customer personas, one of the things they didn't have in there were the jobs to be done by the persona. So if we don't understand the jobs to be done, the wants and the needs of the customer, then how do we develop products to meet those jobs to be done, wants and needs? Lean portfolio management is how do we align, prioritize, and deliver against your top priorities? If you're a big company, whether you like it or not, you're going to have to scale. I know that there's a lot of dislike for scaled agile framework out there, and I personally am a safe program consultant, but I don't drink that Kool-Aid and I don't push that down anybody's throat. I'm just happy if somebody's doing agile at the end of the day. Um, but the most important thing is how are you aligning and prioritizing and delivering against those top priorities. Organ team design. We actually in our workshop we spend quite a bit of time talking about this because how do you actually design the teams to improve the flow of value in the system, the handoffs, the quality, all of that. So that's a really important part. Agile mindset and framework. I mean, you guys are all on this call, you know about that. Leadership agility, I've spoken about that. And then the make it stick and sustain. I spend a lot of time, I come actually, believe it or not, from an HR background. It doesn't often seem that way because I'm quite tough on HR people. But I believe that the HR department actually has the biggest role to play in the organization to enable agile. Because when you think about agile, yes, there's a framework, there's a process, there's a set of ceremonies and practices, but it's all about people. How do we collaborate? How do we do teamwork? How do we lead? What is the culture? How do we, look at performance? How do we reward? So this make it stick and sustain, and then also the change management. We've recently developed a whole new change management model called rapid change agility because the traditional change models don't fit with agile. They take too long. By the time they finish that particular change intervention, that world has changed so radically that it's no longer relevant. And then the last pillar is always the technology pillar, which is the underlining aspect. Just the last slide I want to stop on. And what you'll find when I send you these slides is that I go into a little bit more detail of each of these aspects, but I'd rather finish on this slide right now so that we've got time for some questions and reflections. So the first thing that one of the things that I've always been trying to do is to say, Agile is not just about delivery. Agile is the end-to-end process of creating value for organizations. And that starts at strategy. That just starts at strategy. It goes into you've got certain investments and resources that you've got available to you. How do you utilize that? So we developed what we call the from concept to impact framework, and the impact is the IMPACT that you see around this model, which is the imagine is very much as how do you anticipate, explore, and imagine the emergent changes happening in your market and customer segments, and developing products and services that meet what your customers want and need faster than your competition. Maximize, you've only got a certain amount of money and resources available to you. So you have to prioritize what you're going to spend that money on to get the best value for your customers and your organizations, both now and into the future. The perform is your traditional agile, um, you know, let's take the backlog now, let's push it through our quarterlies and our sprints and our daily stand-ups. Let's get the work done. The adapting is we continually learning and continually looking at the way that the product is or the service is developing, and we're adapting to the way the market's changing, the way the customers are changing. Captivate is very much around how the people side, the culture, the leadership, etc. And then transform really starts leading back into the imagine, which is if you want to drive perpetual growth, understand that your industry is going to continuously change. And I think COVID-19 has proved that to us now. But I can promise you that many organizations are going to sit back and not prepare for the future. They are going to again lose in the future. It's those organizations that are able to, as I say, imagine, maximize, perform, adapt, captivate, and transform that will really be ready for the future. And as you can see, the customer sits in the middle. Without a customer, none of us have a business. And I think far too few people see that. They are busy. I always hear the story of IT departments developing solutions and then looking for a problem to solve with that solution. Whereas what we should be doing first of all is identifying the problems and then looking for solutions to solve the problem. So yeah, that's I know that was a mouthful, and yeah, let's open it up for questions. I know that there's we only had the hour, but I'm happy to stay on a bit longer if anybody else is if we don't get to all the questions.